Part 1. Welcome to the world of Greek myths, or why everyone is related and slightly miserable. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight we begin with something a little different. Let's dim the lights, make ourselves comfortable, maybe pour a cup of lukewarm tea, and slowly drift into the world of Greek mythology. Not the exciting hero battles monster version you've seen in movies. No, we're going to explore the slightly tedious, extremely complicated, and occasionally absurd lives of gods, demigods, and mortals who mostly just made bad choices over and over again. Think of it as a bedtime story that stretches over centuries, with plenty of inbreeding, temper tantrums, and passive-aggressive divine interventions. Greek mythology is like that messy family WhatsApp group you never signed up for, except everyone is immortal, has magical powers, and somehow still manages to ruin each other's lives while complaining about fate. It's a sprawling narrative, and if you try to follow it chronologically, it mostly looks like this. Zeus sleeps with someone he shouldn't. Hera complains. Someone transforms into an animal for reasons no one remembers. And somewhere a hero is born, who will probably die young. Rinse and repeat, and occasionally throw in a talking horse. Let's start at the beginning, which is comfortably vague. The Greeks didn't have a once upon a time neatly packaged for bedtime reading. No, they had chaos. And I don't mean like the modern sense of your apartment after a week without cleaning. Chaos, in Greek terms, was literally nothing. Just emptiness. Void. A yawning abyss. And from this void, something mildly interesting happened. Out popped Gaia, the earth. And Nyx, the night. And a few others, because apparently the void couldn't help itself. Gaia, for the record, is kind of the boring grandmother of mythology. She just sits there and lets things happen, occasionally producing mountains, rivers, and titans when she feels like it. She had a husband, Uranus, who might have been the first case of controlling partner in mythological history. Uranus wasn't exactly affectionate. In fact, he hated his kids, which makes for a charming family dynamic, and they were called the Titans. Yes, the Titans, because naming kids after a word meaning giant and powerful was apparently very on brand for Greek mythology. One Titan, Cronus, grew tired of being shoved into the metaphorical basement by his father, Uranus. Cronus had a habit of doing extreme things when annoyed, which is not uncommon in Greek myths. So he castrated Uranus. It was violent, yes, but in the calm, corporate memo sense of myth. Please be advised, I have taken action. Your bits have been removed. From this incident, a few things were born. Blood on the earth created the Furies and other minor deities, and from the severed parts, Aphrodite appeared. Yes, from genitalia. That's Greek mythology. Extremely inefficient and occasionally gross. Cronus then took over as ruler of the cosmos, because why not double down on family drama? He married his sister, Rhea, because Greek myths liked incest the way modern stories like plot twists. They had children, and here comes a pattern we will see over and over. Cronus, being paranoid and somewhat neurotic, swallowed each of his kids at birth. Not metaphorically, literally. If you were born, you risked instant digestion. Rhea, being understandably tired of losing children to parental anxiety, eventually tricked Cronus with a rock wrapped in swaddling cloths and hid Zeus in Crete. Zeus, for those keeping count, would grow up to be both the most powerful and most promiscuous of the Greek gods. But for now, he was a baby with a complicated childhood. As Zeus matured, he eventually forced Cronus to disgorge his siblings. Now, you might think this would create a peaceful reunion. It didn't. Sibling rivalry was, predictably, still the main feature. They went to war against the Titans in what the Greeks called the Titanomachy. Battles lasted 10 years. Casualties were mostly emotional, though some Titans ended up in Tartarus, which is like the ancient Greek equivalent of an administrative prison for inconvenient relatives. Zeus became king of the gods, and his siblings took positions according to a very unoriginal corporate hierarchy. Poseidon got the sea because he asked first, or maybe because he threw a tantrum. Sources vary. Hades got the underworld, which is really just a bureaucratic nightmare full of ghosts. And Hera, well, Hera got to complain. She married Zeus, which was complicated because Zeus, being Zeus, was frequently unfaithful. This is where Greek mythology becomes less bedtime story and more slow-motion tragedy with wine. The gods, for the most part, behaved like extremely rich and bored humans with immortality and zero emotional regulation. Athena was born from Zeus's head, fully grown and wearing armor, because apparently he needed to be right about everything, even childbirth. Apollo and Artemis were twins, born to Zeus and Leto, because Leto had the misfortune of catching Zeus's attention. Apollo became the god of many things, including music and prophecy, while Artemis became the goddess of the hunt, preferring to spend her time chasing animals rather than socializing with annoying immortals. Let's float over to another royal disaster, which is practically a requirement in Greek myths. King Minos of Crete. Minos was a man of rules, walls, and bad parenting. He married Pasiphae, who had the misfortune of falling in love with a bull. Yes, a literal bull. This was courtesy of Poseidon, who got annoyed that Minos didn't make proper sacrifices. Pasiphae's romantic life led to the birth of the Minotaur, a creature that spent its life in a labyrinth, eating anyone unfortunate enough to wander in. The moral, if there is one, is that divine grudges can ruin family life in ways that make you question the practicality of gods. Meanwhile, humans were not exactly models of stability either. Prometheus, a titan who liked fire, stole it for humans. Zeus was not thrilled. Prometheus got punished by being chained to a rock while an eagle ate his liver every day, which, over time, regenerates. This is a nice example of Greek storytelling. Extreme consequences for simple generosity, and a reminder that suffering is good for character development, or at least amusing to the gods. Heracles, one of the few demigods most people recognize, had a childhood that could be filed under accidental tragedy. Hera, being Hera, decided to make his life miserable from birth, sending snakes into his crib. He strangled them because he was incredibly strong, even as a baby, which is a gentle reminder that Greek heroes had little downtime and almost no therapy options. Heracles would go on to perform 12 labors, tasks designed to be impossibly boring, dangerous, or both. Cleaning stables that hadn't been touched in years, capturing animals, fetching objects, you get the idea. Many Greek myths follow this same pattern. Gods or heroes.
Part 2. The lesser-known tragedies, quirky habits, and boring misadventures of Greek heroes and mortals. So let's continue floating gently through the sleepy world of Greek mythology. By now we've met the Titans, the Olympians, and some early demigods. If you're comfortable, imagine yourself leaning back, maybe with a blanket, as we slowly drift into the long, dull, but somehow fascinating stories of heroes and mortals who mostly just made poor life choices, or were born into situations that were inconvenient, to say the least. We'll start with a hero you've probably heard of, but only in snippets. Perseus. Perseus is known for slaying Medusa, the snake-haired woman whose gaze could turn anyone into stone. But let's pause for a moment. His story is less about heroic flair and more about awkward family politics. His grandfather, Acrisius, was terrified of a prophecy claiming Perseus would kill him, so naturally, he locked his daughter Danae in a bronze tower to prevent her from having children. Which is, of course, an extreme solution because it rarely works in Greek myths. Zeus visited Danae in the form of a golden shower, and yes, that is literally how myth tells it. Perseus was conceived. From birth, Perseus was a product of divine intervention and family paranoia. Eventually, Acrisius attempted to dispose of him in a wooden chest set adrift at sea, because apparently throwing people into water is a recurring theme in Greek tales. Perseus survived, as these heroes usually do, and grew up to kill Medusa, but the method of his success involved a mirror-like shield and a lot of careful tiptoeing. Not exactly thrilling if you imagine it slowly. Step left, step right. Look carefully, now stab. It's like extremely cautious gardening, but with more decapitation. And later, he accidentally fulfilled the prophecy by killing his grandfather with a discus. So Greek myths are partly about fate, and partly about clumsily ticking off prophecies. Next, let's drift toward Jason and the Argonauts. A story often hyped as exciting because they sailed on a fancy boat collecting heroes. But honestly, most of their adventures are less like swashbuckling and more like a long vacation with passive-aggressive squabbles. They were searching for the Golden Fleece, a sort of overcomplicated quest MacGuffin, and every minor challenge involves clever tricks, irritating helpers, or petty revenge. Medea, the sorceress who eventually marries Jason, is fascinating in a slow, tragic sense. She's smart, powerful, and deeply frustrated with Jason's emotional inconsistency. The story doesn't climax with explosions. It meanders through betrayals, magic, and the quiet dread of marital disappointment. Speaking of Medea, she's a perfect example of what happens when minor gods or powerful mortals feel wronged. Her life is mostly a sequence of carefully calculated, extremely unpleasant solutions to emotional problems. If you think modern soap operas are dramatic, Greek myths were like that, but slower, with more curses and fewer commercial breaks. Another gently tragic tale involves Atalanta, a mortal woman who was left to die by her father because he preferred sons. She survived, raised by bears, or sometimes hunters, depending on the version, and became a skilled hunter and athlete. She was fiercely independent, which makes her story less princess in danger and more, why can't anyone respect boundaries? Many suitors tried to woo her with foot races, and one used clever trickery involving golden apples to win her hand. The moral, if there is one, is that cunning often beats athleticism, but only in stories where patience is required. Let's drift over to Theseus, a prince who is famous for killing the Minotaur. His life is mostly about long journeys, forgetful parents, and occasionally inconvenient divine interventions. His father, Aegeus, left him a sword and sandals under a rock and said, "Lift these when you're strong enough, my son." Theseus did, naturally, and set off to find himself. Along the way, he encountered various minor villains, each more irritating than the last. When he arrived in Crete, he defeated the Minotaur in a labyrinth, an event more about careful planning than heroics, and then forgot to change the color of his sails on the journey home. This small oversight caused his father to die, proving again that Greek myths are as much about forgetfulness as fate. We should also consider Achilles, known for being mostly a broody and occasionally cranky warrior. His mother dipped him in the river Styx to make him invulnerable, holding him by the heel, which left a small weak spot. Achilles is sometimes portrayed as heroic, but if you slow down and think about it, he spent most of the Trojan War sulking, arguing, and refusing to fight because someone insulted him. The Iliad itself is a long, meandering account of stubbornness, minor injuries, and slow plodding. The exciting battles are less dynamic if you imagine the narration in a calm monotone. He struck, he waited, he withdrew, then he struck again. Perfectly sleep-inducing. Greek mythology also includes many less famous mortals who have stories that are equal parts tragic and boring. Take Niobe, for instance. She boasted about her many children, which angered Leto. In response, Apollo and Artemis methodically killed all of them. Niobe turned into a weeping stone. The story is more about the quiet inevitability of consequence than dramatic action. She spent her life slowly grieving, which is almost meditative in tone, perfect for a bedtime narrative. Another case is Echo, a nymph cursed to only repeat the last words spoken to her. She fell in love with Narcissus, who famously ignored her. Echo spent her days echoing, which is tragically uneventful. Greek myths are full of these small, repetitive tragedies, love unrequited, punishment proportional to minor arrogance, and a universe that seems mildly annoyed with everyone. It's soothing in a way, like the mythological equivalent of watching clouds drift lazily across the sky. Now, of course, there are tragically inbred dynasties, which Greek mythology is fond of highlighting. Many royal families married cousins, siblings, or other close relatives, resulting in complex family trees that are both confusing and mildly depressing. The House of Thebes, for example, is a perfect study in quiet familial collapse. Oedipus's story leads to children unknowingly cursed with misfortune, marriages, and deaths that unfold slowly and inexorably, like a faintly tragic lullaby. There's no sudden shock, but just generations of inconvenience, emotional baggage, and awkward prophecies. Even the minor gods exhibit repetitive quirks. Take Hephaestus the blacksmith god. He was thrown off Mount Olympus by his mother Hera because he was, well, not exactly handsome. He married Aphrodite, who promptly ignored him, preferring Ares instead. Their love triangle isn't dramatic in the modern sense. It's quiet, simmering, and full of awkward tension. Hephaestus spent his immortal life making fine objects for the gods while silently enduring marital disinterest. Perfect for a slow bedtime meditation on the quiet endurance of existence. Hera, on the other hand, was mostly occupied quietly punishing anyone who annoyed her, especially Zeus. Her strategies were intricate, subtle, and emotionally exhausting for all involved. You could imagine her sitting in her immortal throne, slowly plotting minor inconveniences, which is oddly comforting in its predictability. Meanwhile, Dionysus, as mentioned before, is the god who disrupts the slow monotony. He introduces festivals, wine, and occasional chaos. But even his disruptions are mostly boring in execution if you slow down. They drank, they danced, some became mildly mad, and then they slept. A soothing cycle, really, if you're in the mood for sleep. Mortals like Arachne also contribute to this gentle melancholy. She was a skilled weaver who challenged Athena, and after winning, was turned into a spider. Her story is not action-packed, it's more about pride, minor conflict, and quiet transformation. She spends eternity weaving, predictable, repetitive, and oddly rhythmic. Excellent.
Part 3. The obscure heroes, endless labors, and mildly annoying divine meddling. All right, let's continue floating gently through Greek mythology, where most stories are less epic adventure and more slow-motion social awkwardness with magic. If you're settled in, maybe with a pillow behind your head, we can drift into the stories of heroes who tried to be brave, but mostly ended up mildly inconvenienced or deeply annoyed by the whims of gods and fate. One of the first figures to consider here is Bellerophon, a hero who, unlike Perseus or Achilles, is mostly remembered for his good luck and bad judgment. Bellerophon rode Pegasus, a winged horse, because everyone in Greek myths has either a curse, a weapon, or a magical animal. He was sent on boring but dangerous quests by King Proetus, who didn't like him for reasons that were never fully explained, typical Greek monarchy. His most famous challenge was slaying the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster. Not exactly relaxing, but imagine hearing the story slowly. Bellerophon flies over a mountain. The Chimera breathes fire. He thrusts a spear. Repeat. And that's it. Success, quiet applause, and then a return to mild bureaucratic annoyances in the royal court. Bellerophon's downfall is equally understated. He thought he could fly to Olympus to join the gods. Pegasus, being a reasonable horse, refused. Bellerophon fell to earth and spent the rest of his life wandering alone. The moral? Ambition is mildly inconvenient, and hubris usually ends with you lying on the ground, nursing a headache. Very soothing if you narrate it slowly. Meanwhile, we can look at Hippolytus, the son of Theseus. Hippolytus was so boringly virtuous that it annoyed people. His stepmother, Phaedra, fell in love with him. This caused mild domestic drama, some accusations, and eventually Hippolytus was cursed by Poseidon, dragged to his death by his own chariot, and left in a calm, tragic heap. Greek mythology is full of slow-moving consequences like this. Subtle mismanagement of feelings, a small divine nudge, and an eventual death that feels almost bureaucratic, perfect for a slow, melancholic narrative. The Trojan War is, of course, famous, but even here, the actual stories are mostly tedious if you remove the excitement. Heroes quarrel, insult each other, and spend long periods sulking and tense. Patroclus dies, Achilles sulks, Hector fights honorably and dies, and the war stretches for 10 years. If you narrate this calmly, it becomes a meditation on stubbornness and minor inefficiency. They camped, they argued, they fought, they waited, they fought again. Perfectly monotone, lulling, and occasionally tragic. Even the most famous stories from the war are less action-packed than they seem. Take the Trojan horse. It's often portrayed as brilliant strategy, but in slow motion, it's more like a very long waiting game. Greeks hide in a wooden horse. The Trojans, mildly curious, drag it inside the city. Greeks wait. Night comes. Then they quietly open the gates. Very few explosions, mostly careful coordination and mildly annoying deception. Great for sleep. The Trojan War also introduces us to Helen of Troy, whose story is less about her beauty and more about the passive chaos she causes. Everyone fights over her, kingdoms are mildly disrupted, and she mostly sits in Troy, watching events unfold with a sense of calm detachment or mild boredom. The stories surrounding her are repetitive. Someone kidnaps her, another person declares war, minor gods meddle, and the cycle continues. Nothing dramatic if you remove the adrenaline. Let's drift toward the quiet misadventures of Diomedes, a hero who fought in Troy and occasionally injured gods because why not irritate immortals in a slow, calculated fashion? He spends most of his narrative running into trouble, getting mildly wounded, and moving on. Greek mythology doesn't reward subtlety with drama. It rewards subtlety with mild inconvenience for a very long time. Similarly, Aeneas, a Trojan survivor, has a journey that is both tedious and instructive in its calmness. He escapes Troy, travels across the Mediterranean, encounters minor obstacles, and eventually reaches Italy. Along the way, there is divine interference, some miscommunications, and a bit of mild romance with Dido. He doesn't battle monsters every 5 minutes. He mostly trudges, meets people, and quietly fulfills fate. Perfectly suited for a gentle bedtime story. Even the gods have moments of quiet inconvenience. Apollo, god of music and prophecy, spends years nursing grudges, pining for unrequited love, and occasionally killing someone who annoyed him. His stories are mostly repetitive. He falls in love, the object of affection resists, someone dies, and Apollo sighs. No dramatic explosions, no dramatic flair. Just sighing, harp music, and emotional monotony. The labors of Heracles, while technically exciting, are best experienced in slow narration. Take his cleaning of the Augean stables. Years' worth of filth, one day, one hero. It took a river to finish the task. The story is almost meditative if you think about it. Pushing, pulling, washing, waiting. His other labors, capturing boars, lions, and other creatures, are equally slow when stripped of dramatic music and sound effects. Heracles' life is mostly doing tedious tasks, suffering mild insults from gods, and occasionally crying about being misunderstood. Then there's Orpheus, who tried to retrieve Eurydice from the underworld. The story is less about heroism and more about extreme patience and tragic timing. He negotiates with Hades, follows strict instructions, fails to follow a minor detail, and loses Eurydice forever. His slow walk out of the underworld, turning around only slightly too soon, is a masterclass in quiet, meditative tragedy. Perfect for a calm bedtime narrative. Step, 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 sigh, repeat. We also encounter minor gods like Hestia, goddess of the hearth.
Part 4. Obscure gods, tedious genealogies, and quietly tragic families. Let's continue our slow drift through Greek mythology, where the real fun, or perhaps gentle monotony, resides in the obscure gods, minor demigods, and dynasties that never quite get their act together. By now, you've noticed a pattern. The myths are less about adrenaline-fueled adventure and more about mild inconvenience, familial awkwardness, and endless consequences for small mistakes. We begin with minor gods, who are often quietly fascinating. Take Hebe, goddess of youth. She spent most of her immortal life serving ambrosia at banquets, occasionally marrying Heracles after his ascension to Olympus. Her story is repetitive, calm, and faintly bittersweet. Imagine serving the same drink over centuries with little recognition. Not thrilling, but perfect for a sleepy narrative. Then there is Nike, goddess of victory, who mostly floats around glorifying winners. She rarely intervenes, mostly observes, and gently nods when someone achieves something noteworthy. Her presence is understated, quietly reinforcing the idea that even the exciting concept of victory or success is in myth slow and ceremonious. The genealogies of mortals and minor heroes are another area of gentle fascination. Many families in mythology are endlessly intertwined, marrying cousins, nieces, or other distant relatives. Take the House of Thebes, for example. Laius and Jocasta, parents of Oedipus, unwittingly perpetuated a tragic cycle of misfortune. Their children and grandchildren repeated similar errors, almost as if boredom and fate were intertwined. Slowly tracing these family trees is like watching a river meander through a valley, predictable, intricate, and quietly mesmerizing. Even the lesser-known demigods live slow, repetitive, and mildly tragic lives. Asclepius, the god of medicine, is interesting because he healed people and sometimes raised the dead, but he was eventually killed by Zeus. His story isn't dramatic in the cinematic sense. It's calm, methodical, and laden with irony, trying to do good quietly, only to irritate a more powerful deity. Perfectly soothing in a monotone narration. He healed. He revived. Zeus frowned. He died. Another minor demigod, Hippolytus, as mentioned earlier, is worth revisiting. His life revolves around excessive virtue and unfortunate consequences. His stepmother falls in love with him. He is falsely accused, and Poseidon quietly ensures his death. There's no dramatic climax, just slow-moving tragedy that stretches over weeks, months, or years, depending on the version. Greek mythology also indulges in boring but morally instructive domestic tales. For example, the family of Pelops involves cursed marriages, minor murders, and competitive chariot races. Pelops wins a race, but later faces subtle betrayals from his children and grandchildren. Every generation repeats similar errors in slow succession, like clockwork. Perfect for imagining in a calm voice. He raced. He won. He married. His children argued. They repeated his mistakes. Meanwhile, minor divine feuds quietly shape the world. Aphrodite, for instance, has endless disputes over love and beauty. She incites jealousy in goddesses and mortals alike. But the actions are slow and methodical. Glances exchanged, favors withheld, minor curses applied. Unlike dramatic battles, these conflicts unfold over months or years, a perfect cadence for bedtime storytelling. Even minor punishments are strangely meditative. Take Tantalus, who stole from the gods and annoyed them. His punishment was standing in a pool of water with fruit overhead, both perpetually out of reach. Slowly imagining him trying to drink and eat endlessly, failing each time, is oddly hypnotic. Greek myths have a knack for creating repetitive consequences that are mild, ironic, and tedious, perfect for lulling the mind. Now, consider minor heroic misadventures like those of Philoctetes. He was left on an island because of a stinking wound, waited for years, and eventually helped in Troy. The story isn't exciting. It's a slow march of irritation, patience, and mild suffering. Imagine hearing this narrated. He waited. The wound festered. He waited more. A messenger arrived. He acted. Then he waited again. Calm, predictable, and vaguely sad. Even obscure tragedies offer sleepy charm. Take Iphigenia, the daughter of Agamemnon. She is sacrificed, or nearly sacrificed, depending on the version, because the winds won't allow the Greek fleet to sail to Troy. Some versions replace her with a deer at the last moment. The story's excitement is replaced by a slow examination of duty, obedience, and mild familial horror, perfect for a long, drawn-out narration in a monotone voice. We also encounter funny little quirks among the gods and mortals. Dionysus, for example, frequently drives people insane, not for dramatic effect, but because he's bored or mildly annoyed. Midas, cursed with a golden touch, spends days discovering the consequences. Food he cannot eat, water he cannot drink, minor emotional discomfort. Imagine hearing each small inconvenience detailed methodically. It's practically a lullaby of caution. Even romantic complications are slow and tedious. Take Ceyx and Alcyone, who were a devoted couple. Ceyx drowned at sea, Alcyone mourned. The gods turned them into birds. No sudden drama, just gentle transformation, quiet grief, and a rhythmic pattern: sorrow, acceptance, metamorphosis. Ideal for a sleepy audience. Minor heroes of the Trojan War like Ajax the Lesser also live slow, contemplative lives filled with moral ambiguity and minor misadventures. He survives the war, offends the gods, and dies in a quiet, ironic twist of fate. Nothing sudden, nothing overly dramatic, just a gentle slide into consequences. And let's not forget Odysseus, whose epic journey home is mostly repetitive encounters with mildly irritating monsters, inconvenient gods, and long stretches of travel. The Cyclops incident, Circe's island, and the sirens are all stretched out in time. A calm narration emphasizes the monotony. He sailed. He landed. He waited. He negotiated. He sailed again. Even the famous journey becomes a slow, meandering exploration of persistence, patience, and mild peril. Greek myths also revel in quietly ironic punishments. Arachne, punished for her weaving skills, spends eternity spinning webs. Niobe mourns children lost, frozen as stone. Sisyphus endlessly rolls his boulder. All of these are ideal for a gentle, sleep-friendly cadence, repetitive, inevitable, and mildly melancholy. Even the divine hierarchies are slow and tiresome. Zeus rules, Hera complains, Poseidon gets grumpy, Athena interjects occasionally, and minor gods scurry about doing menial work. The larger events like battles or plagues unfold gradually, often as side effects of small annoyances or overlooked instructions. There's no sudden tension, just a long, deliberate unfolding. And of course, we have patterns repeated across generations. Families curse themselves, heroes fail to follow instructions, and God.
Part 5. Minor Myths, Repetitive Misadventures, and the Gentle Cycles of Fate. Let's continue our slow drift through Greek mythology, where the excitement is minimal, the consequences are inevitable, and the characters often spend decades quietly suffering from petty annoyances. By now, you've met the major gods, some famous heroes, and plenty of minor tragedies. In this part, we'll wander through the more obscure myths, the repetitive labors, and the gentle, inevitable cycles that define this mythological world. One group of characters worth considering are the river gods and nymphs, whose stories are almost hypnotically mundane. They spend their days flowing, tending groves, or quietly influencing minor mortals. Take Heracles, the river god who lost a contest over a woman named Deianira. Instead of dramatic war, the contest ended with shape-shifting and mild annoyance, leading to slow, inevitable consequences for everyone involved.
Imagine his gentle, unhurried complaints echoing in the waters like a soft lullaby of irritation. I flowed. I transformed. I lost. I sighed. Perfectly meditative. We also encounter minor mortals, whose lives unfold in repetitive tragedy. Take Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple visited by Zeus and Hermes, disguised as travelers. Instead of dramatic heroics, they offer hospitality, live long, uneventful lives, and eventually transform into trees. Their story is calm, comforting, and slightly melancholic. A slow meditation on kindness and patience. It's the mythological equivalent of sipping tea while watching the rain. Then there are the endlessly frustrated lovers, like Pyramus and Thisbe, whose tragic romance inspired later tales. Their miscommunication leads to death, but if you slow it down, it's mostly about delayed messages, mild misunderstandings, and quiet inevitability. Picture the scene narrated gently. They waited. They saw a shadow. They misjudged. They fell. Silence followed. Perfect for slow, meditative listening. Greek myths also include repetitive tales of divine interference in everyday life. Consider Aeolus, god of the winds, who mostly spends his time gently controlling breezes, squalls, and annoying sailors. Odysseus receives a bag of winds from him, loses it through forgetfulness, and the journey continues. Nothing explosive, just slow, inevitable consequences of minor mistakes, perfectly suited for a sleepy mind. Even the tragic lives of minor demigods contribute to this gentle monotony. Cassandra, cursed to always speak the truth but never be believed, spends her life warning others in vain. Trojans ignore her advice. Events unfold exactly as she predicted. Slowly, gently, her tragedy teaches patience and quiet frustration, perfect for bedtime contemplation. She spoke. They ignored. Fate moved. She waited. She sighed. The continuing cycles of punishment are also hypnotic. Take Titius, punished for assaulting Leto. His liver regenerates daily as an eagle eats it. Or Ixion, bound to a spinning wheel. The repetition is soothing in its predictability, like the ticking of a slow, deliberate clock. Greek mythology is full of these gently tragic rhythms, endless, inevitable, and strangely comforting. Even heroes' journeys, like those of Orpheus, Jason, or Odysseus, often involve long stretches of waiting, small miscalculations, and minor misadventures. Jason sails with the Argonauts, collects the golden fleece, and returns home. The story isn't explosive, it's long, repetitive, and filled with subtle moral lessons. Trust carefully, respect the gods, and always anticipate small inconveniences. Ideal for calm, soothing narration. He sailed. He arrived. He negotiated. He sailed again.